Our records show that Detroit's crime rate is 5 times the national average. More than 78,000 buildings have been abandoned and around 40% of streetlights don't work. Even emergency services are affected. City officials say 2/3 of Detroit's ambulances are out of service. For more, let's speak now to William Black, a professor of economics and law at the University of Missouri. Welcome once again to Al Jazeera. Bill, what does a city like Detroit filing for bankruptcy mean?
Well, this is the town where I was born and grew up in the area. What it means is that they will slash the union contracts. They will slash the pension funds. And so in the first thing that's going to happen is a whole lot of people in Detroit who are already poor are going to get much poorer. And so Detroit is actually going to go downhill. You'll also get a great deal of litigation as creditors try to get, in jargon, put my former bankruptcy lawyer hat on, relief from the automatic stay, in other words, permission from the court to continue the suit despite the bankruptcy.
Could the city grind to a complete stop?
No, I mean, there will still be people working, and there will still be people in government working. There will still be police officers. But as your setup piece said, the devastation in Detroit is larger than any major city in the United States, and it's larger than any economic devastation in the history of the United States. And this comes, of course, on the heels of the Great Recession and the housing crisis. And Detroit was already one of the epicenters of the mortgage crisis. If you add all of these things to it, it's just the death of 1,000 cuts.
Do you expect that businesses might also start ditching their operations in Detroit?
Well, businesses have been ditching their operations in Detroit for 40 years. People, your viewers doubtless remember that there was a federal bailout of the automobile companies. And in general, the two that were bailed out, which are GM and Chrysler, not Ford Motor Company, are doing pretty well, and Ford Motor Company is doing quite well. But very few of their operations are in Detroit anymore. Indeed, very few of them are in Michigan, the state of Michigan, compared to the rest of the nation. And so Detroit used to be the economic engine, not just for the Detroit metropolitan area or even the state of Michigan. This is where all the coal came to drive the steel mills, where you brought the iron from Minnesota, the coal from West Virginia, from Ohio and such. So it was the engine of an entire region of the United States that we now call the Rust Belt because it's fallen on such difficult economic times. So as Detroit goes, so does much of the Midwest.
What happened, Bill? How much of Detroit's collapse is due to corruption and mismanagement?
Well, a substantial part. Indeed, I was an expert witness in a corruption case fairly recently. And there were a series of mayors who resigned in disgrace or were investigated or prosecuted, or all of those things combined. But prior to the appointment of this emergency manager, there were actually quite good leadership. A famous sportsman, Dave Bing, who was an entrepreneur, a well-respected business person and such. And really no one can pull Detroit out of these circumstances. You really need aid, not that bails out the auto companies, but bails out the people of America and lets them have a chance to get going again. These emergency managers, by the way, are appointed almost exclusively for cities that are a majority of their population is African American. So there's an enormous racial angle to all of this. And when these emergency managers are appointed, the people, for example, of Detroit now have absolutely no democratic rights at the city level. They cannot vote the manager out of office. They cannot vote to block any of his actions. They cannot vote to, for example, say, let's all get together and clean up the streets in conjunction with the police department and the fire department. All of those democratic powers have been removed from the city of Detroit and about 15 other cities in Michigan that are overwhelmingly majority African American populations.
All righty, Bill. Thank you very much for speaking to us. William Black, a professor of economics and law at the University of Missouri.